Well, I was raised in Michigan, USA. Middle class family. My father worked at a bank. Three brothers, one older, two younger. So I was the only girl. That made a big difference in my life because my neighborhood was mostly boys and my brothers. And so, yeah, that was kind of more of a male dominated place, I think. I worked in many different jobs up to then. Worked in a factory before I went to university, and then while I was in university at University of Michigan, I worked at a factory also, and started doing secretarial work for this company while I was going to school. And these guys that were in the factory were a lot of fun. They were kind of my age, and they'd play loud music in the factory. We had a good time. The owners were gone, so the music would be cranked up, and they taught me how to use the different machines, and so that was really fun. And then let's see, when I graduated from university with a degree in teaching, they were laying off teachers all over, so it was very difficult, if not impossible, to get a job. But I ended up working for the city I was in, and I was a parking enforcement officer. So it was very interesting. It taught me how to be assertive because people would argue about their tickets, of course, and want you to tear up the ticket. And it was, one of those things just to know that when you're mean to the parking enforcement person, they look for your car. And so I learned how to kind of hold my ground and say, no, no, you got the ticket. That helps in teaching high school too, secondary. But then let's see, when we moved to Oklahoma, after my husband graduated from university, then I was um, went to graduate school. Initially, started in social work. Had a wonderful professor in my MSW program who told the class a story about being the social worker for a person who had murdered her children, put the baby in the oven, killed the children. And she said, okay, now you're that woman's social worker. Can you do that? And I just thought, no, I couldn't do that. I couldn't, yes, I can feel, I can try to be compassionate, know this person came from perhaps very difficult circumstances herself, but it would just be so hard to remain neutral in that kind of situation. So I decided to switch majors and got a degree in management instead. Also realized people in management made a whole lot more than social workers, even though the social workers were doing very, very difficult work. Um, Also, while going to school, I worked teaching soldiers because we were near a military base. Um, these were soldiers who joined the military because that was their only option, kind of. Many of them had a very low reading level and math level. So the goal was to get them at a third grade level for math and a fifth grade level for reading so that they could do the basic things they needed for their military job. So um, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed working with the older kids. They were like 18 years old, 20, something like that. Then I got a job teaching with the FAA, Federal Aviation Administration, doing supervisory and management. Very interesting story there. So that was a contract for the government working with the Department of Transportation of Federal Aviation. I was quite, I enjoyed it a lot. Most of the people I worked with were my parents' age. So I was like the youngest person they had hired, and just really felt like I grew at that job. We even did the adventure learning outdoor ropes program. Um, it was pretty neat. We did a lot of innovative things for the federal government. And then I was tasked to lead a team that developed a whole program in human resource management for the federal government. And yeah, so we developed this innovative program for teaching all these people in human resources. And that really led me to find out about this and be chosen to participate in this executive leadership program, which was run by a guy who used tactics that were questionable at best. He physically tied us to a partner who he felt we could learn from because we were either opposites or too much alike. And because I was a bit of a joker and trying to kind of lighten the mood because it was really heavy at times, including screaming at us and that kind of thing. So I guess he thought I was a bit of a problem from his agenda. And so he tied me in the middle of, there were three women. Some of the people were tied male and female. You could not untie. You had to go to the bathroom together. You had to take showers together. You had to eat everything. Now, what was interesting about that is that I survived it, but also couple of friends of mine who were in it too, we blew the whistle on the federal government. We went to the Department of Transportation, the Inspector General. We reported all of this. Things were in the U.S. media at the time. There were articles in Newsweek and Time and that sort of thing because we exposed. And part of what led us to be able to expose this is, ironically, my mother-in-law had read an article about this guy who's the trainer who was connected to this. I know it sounds made up, it's so bizarre, but he was connected to the Ramtha movement. Ramtha was, I don't know if she's still alive, she had been a cable TV salesperson who ended up claiming to channel for this 5,000-year-old warrior from the lost city of Atlantis. And so she had this cult following up in Yelm, Washington. So we were able to kind of connect the dots and show this is what was going on. Well, the bad news was, of course, I lost my job with the federal government. What I found out years later, because I was in another kind of corporate training situation, is that the federal government had to change their laws about how they contracted because this guy was doing a lot of illegal contracting. And of course, the training was, it was hard to make the connection between that and executive leadership. And so as a result, the system changed. And but of course, there's always a price to pay for that. I was working on a doctorate in educational leadership, did all but the dissertation for that. And life happens, you know. So I never got the actual PhD, but took the oral exams, took the written exams, passed fine, and never got the paper done. But it was tough. It was tough times, kind of moving around and stuff. But and that at that point too, my mom was quite ill and everything. So it's one thing I think when you're a young person, you think it's just going to be this straight line trajectory in terms of your career. My story is you will meander all over the place. And so doing, you know, corporate training work, doing university teaching, and doing consulting work, at administration. Um, yeah, it all just kind of, you can go in different directions. Got to be open to learning, and really keep growing yourself throughout your career. The first factory job I had was right out of high school. So I was just 18, hadn't gone to school yet. And it was really funny. I never told them I was going to university. I just needed a summer job, and I got a little more than minimum wage because I worked nights. And it was so cool because there were a lot of people, young people who were never going to go to college or university. I mean, what I like is to be in groups that are different than I am. And so that exposed me to a lot of different people. There were some older women there that had worked there their whole lives and they were just like bitter and angry. And I'd listen to their stories and ask them questions and stuff. And I just felt like, wow, this is a kind of a side of life I didn't necessarily know. And then I remember being exposed in, I think, my freshman year to the Communist Manifesto. And, and it's like, wow, it just opened my eyes to a lot of things. But a big thing, too, happened to me when I was a young person, 14, I think. I woke up one morning to the news of Dr. Martin Luther King being assassinated. And that just hit me really hard because I had been following him with the news stories and everything. And then to realize he was assassinated, it just hurt. It felt like, wait a minute, he's trying to do the right thing, good things to change the society, to make it more equal, more opportunities for people. And it's like, who would kill him? Why would somebody kill him? And I really cried that morning because it was like that sense that it didn't make any sense. This was a senseless killing to a person who was really doing something good. I always felt like my life shouldn't be about just having a job. I wanted my life to be about doing something that would have meaning, purpose. Um, and, I could see that you can make meaning, you can make any kind of career into one that really has broader perspective and broader meaning, brings some kind of help to people. Everybody was in a garage band, rock band, in the 60s and 70s. The songs of that era, the songs from the 60s and the 70s were so centered around this idea of protest and change. Um, and at the time, the Vietnam War, the U.S. being involved in the war, was a trying time for America, and so I did go to a few things about that, but also political candidates who were more on the liberal side of things and getting involved with that. I did do some um, political canvassing in inner city Detroit. And I remember somebody saying to me, one of the other, because I was just like a 18, 19-year-old, white female college student. And it was kind of like, well, what are you doing down here? And it's like, that really hit me. I didn't think of it that way. I never thought of it like this is dangerous. I did dangerous things that I never thought of were dangerous at the time, but they were dangerous. And now I realize if one of my students did that or one of my friends' kids did that, I'd be like, what? Think just kind of asking yourself those tough questions about, am I willing for the risk? When I want to experiment with this in my life, am I willing for the risk I'm taking? I mean, my own kids, my two older boys, definitely, they experimented with marijuana and stuff before it was legal. And I remember catching my one son and his friends in our house, and I was like, look, I said, what? I understand. I'm not opposed, but the law is the law. And if you get caught with this in my house, I could be in trouble in terms of losing my house potentially. So I said, what you choose to do is what you choose to do, but don't bring it into my house. And so if you go to the local park or whatever, again, there are consequences. Your choice, but um, this is my house was off limits for that. Um, and my son's always had a lot of friends over. My two older boys, so I always enjoyed having the kids in the house. It was fun. My youngest son came out as gay a couple of years ago, a few years ago. He said he knew he was gay from the time he was 9. But we were Baha'i, and he was raised in a Baha'i household, and Baha'i everything, children's classes, the whole thing. And he always felt like he couldn't be who he really was. And so I feel this has been a real learning and a tough thing for me because I feel responsible for having raised him in that way. And he understands. I said, look, we thought this was the best, but I didn't know. So I feel really bad that kind of perpetuated this bad feeling about yourself, that you somehow were not okay. Um, so it really made me have to think about my views and my own prejudices, which now I feel like I've confronted those and understand. My husband's still dealing with it some because I think he hasn't quite gotten that it's not like a lifestyle choice, which a lot of people in my generation and older used to think. And it's like he knew from you when he was 9. It's not like you're choosing a lifestyle at 9, and plus, because of the prejudices and the challenges of being LGBTQ, you who's going to choose this? It's like this is who you are. It's not a choice. I had friends who were LGBTQ, and it was never like an issue in terms of being friends with. But it wasn't until my own son came out that I really could understand it, you know, and be fully empathetic and supportive of gay rights and stuff. So yeah, so that was a learning too. And I mean, from my experience in life, you're learning, but you've got to be willing to learn from not just the standard way of thinking, people who are more educated or whatever, but to learn from your own life experiences, the people you're around, the music you listen to, the books you read, the things you're exposed to. In my generation, unfortunately, there was a lot of expectations that girls conformed to. And even my mom, I think, was always kind of like, well, maybe someday she'll settle down, and just be more normal. But I never felt like I fit that stereotype. I clearly didn't fit that stereotype. And I am very grateful for a world that we have now where I think girls can be themselves more, and I always felt like I was bucking the system with that. And it was a terrible system, for boys too. Where